This podcast where we talk about children's books and adult discussions, as well as other media like movies, TV, anything going on in social media that affects our children. Here we discuss the life lessons we can grasp from these things and the content that can be used to develop and enhance our worldview. It's an open discussion, and we like to keep it respectful. At the end of the day, it's about sharing perspectives, educating and helping each other so that we can affect how we relate these messages to our children. Smash that like button, share, and subscribe. Does anyone want to comment on the book before I go in?
I'll let you talk about it first.
I want to say I really appreciated this type of story and what the author was trying to do with the content, because it's a very difficult conversation. I know from my point of view growing up, it was, if you go to jail, we don't know you. So this was nice to see that, looking at it from a kid's perspective and how they might feel about someone, especially if it's a, parent. It's a lot different than if it's a cousin or like a distant relative. But when it's a parent and someone you're used to having at home and you don't quite understand what's going on, you just know that prison, it's a bad connotation, it's a negative thing. And so to have all these positive things around that experience, I think it was a great job that they did in doing that and having this book as a resource for a family going through something like this.
I was very shocked at one of the pages in the book where it talked about the statistics around parents in jail and the fact, and if I heard it wrong, please correct me, but that the percentage of women in jail with children was higher than men with children in prison. With a father in prison.
Mm-hmm. 75%.
I was taken back by that. 75% of the women in jail are mothers, and it was like 65. And it just stunned me that more mothers are in jail than fathers, even though more men are in jail. That got me. And then breaking that down to a child's level of understanding and, being bullied at school about it. Just as adults, we have to really take into account the things that we do and how it impacts our children. I was really shocked that more mothers, according to that statistic, that more mothers were in jail than fathers.
Well, that's what I'm trying to explain. That's not what it said. There are 92% of fathers who are actually in jail. If we separate them and just look at the percentage of men alone. What they did in that initial breakdown was explain to you between men and women combined, 65% of inmates in America are male. When we just focus on the group of women that are in prison, out of 100%, 75% of those women are in jail. But if we focus on the 65% of men who are in jail, within that 65, which becomes 100 now, 92% of men who are in jail are in fact fathers. Also,
but I get what she's saying. She's just trying to
break down the numbers. But if you want the proper statistics, you can go to fatherhood.gov, and the statistics, even of last year, are also present for you there.
More than you was thought.
Yeah, that's pretty much. I mean, the fact that this book is written for the audience of children. It was just stunning to me because, what I do for a living as a teacher, I deal with a very, the people that I work with, I live in a high poverty area. I work in a high poverty area. The crime rate is high. So when I work with the children and the population that I do work with, I have neglected the fact that a lot of these children are probably dealing with traumas based on that. And they're acting out and they're doing things based on, how it's said that the character turned around and threw the books off of another child's desk, and, the sensitivities behind when people talk about a parent, when children talk about other children's parents. I'd be like, your mama ain't thinking about him, but that pain of having a parent in jail, I neglected to think about what kind of impact that might be having on the population of people that I work with. That those children might be exhibiting those behaviors because they might have a parent in jail. Because I don't think where I work has a, I don't think they have a group or a special, thing for children with parents that are in jail. I don't think my school is addressing that.
Yeah, I don't think, especially in lower income neighborhoods or in areas where there just might be a higher police presence in general, where even if it's for a short stint of time, like when they used to do the stop and frisk and they just scoop up everybody in an area, just because of that, put them in jail for a couple of hours or so, that has an effect, a huge effect on a child for the same reasons. He didn't have to be put, and I'm glad they didn't go into any details like, what he might have been in jail for, because it doesn't matter. The fact remains that that happened, and this is what comes after that. This is how the family is affected. This is how the community is affected. This is how, when that child goes to school, and then the counselors, and then the social worker, and then time afterwards. That one incident is still, a big part of that child's life, that community's life. And it's not addressed in most cases. I really appreciate how they had all of these different types of support that was mentioned that you don't typically hear about. You have the social worker, but then you also have the school counselor that's trying to, address the issue and help give advice in another way. They talked about the family unit, how the family's showing support, how within the population of other kids whose parents have also been to jail, how they're grouping together and healing together with that.
I just think it's really, the mother's thing is standing out to me. And I don't know why. The mother thing is really just jolting to my system, because just the area that I live in, most children are living in blended families or, families that are not the stereotypical nuclear family. And most of the children that I know are with a female. They are with a mother or a mother figure. And when that book said, I just never even really thought, my brain wasn't even thinking that kids' mothers are in jail. You always think about, when you look at the news, when you look at all the propaganda and everything, it's always men, especially a certain population of men. But I never really thought about women, because even the title of the book, when the night my dad went to jail, how does it impact children when your mom is the head of the household and she goes to jail and your mom is the head, it's just something, it just jolted me. I have known children with their dads in jail. As a matter of fact, a majority of I'll call them clients that I have, a lot of them have their dads in jail, a lot of them, but I never really thought about the moms.
I feel like that's a whole other topic of discussion, because I feel if it does affect the same way, it's just that it's now a question of at what point in the child's life did the mom go to jail? Because I did watch a couple of documentaries when I read this book, just to kind of get, other perspectives on how any parent in jail kind of lives and works through that while watching their child grow up from pictures and letters and not being able to be in their life. I specifically wanted to look into parents who are in jail for life are on death row and they have kids and what that relationship looks like. It was very difficult to get much. I feel like society doesn't really, like, we have so much out there, YouTube, Google, whatever. This was not easy to find things on. A lot of what I did find was mothers, specifically ones who've had babies while they were in jail. Either they came in pregnant or got pregnant through some form or another. And it's kind of, I don't want to say 50-50, but from what I was seeing, it was 50-50. I don't think it is. But for those who gave up for adoption or just signed over custody to a family member, a lot of the times it seems like if it's a young child, that's why I said it matters when, or a newborn, it's easier for them to kind of give up, you know, wanting to be a part of their child's life versus if they were like preteen, teenagers, and they kind of want to, especially because they feel like, you know, they really are still in that mode of, I have to protect my child, even though I'm not, you know, in proximity to them. I want to make sure that I still have some input in their life and that they don't end up where I am. And it was a lot of, you know, how kids go through that stage in their life as normal. They're rebellious. Do you have kids that maybe initially heartbroken, like this child was, like trying to find forgiveness over time? Then you have others that are just, they're angry, you know, they felt betrayed, that no matter what their parent did, they are basically, they let themselves get taken out of their child's life. That's how the child may feel. And that's how a lot of them said they were just, you know, pissed off that, you know, I need you and you're not here for me. So like I said, that opened up a huger discussion to me that I feel we could put in another segment, just because there's so little. And I would love to hear from people actually going through it, because it definitely needs some support in that area, especially in lower income communities, where that's a reason why, you know, a child might be failing in school, why they're not doing well socially, or why they choose the path they choose.
I agree. I think that's a great step forward, especially as it does come to communities of color, where the incarceration rates for even lesser or nonviolent offenses are extremely high. And obviously they can't afford bail and things of that nature, or proper representation to avoid jail time to begin with, oftentimes. And often they don't know their rights and they agree to things that they don't mean to agree to. So I think that would be wonderful. There were a larger discussion. And obviously it depends on the type of offense that's committed, because like in this story, for instance, this illustration doesn't actually provide what he was detained for. It just says that he's there for 6 years, but the focus seems to be about how the child is processing the fact that he or she's not able to see their father and have a relationship, a proper engagement. And it seems that it's about keeping some level of connection, even from behind bars, which I think comes with its pros and cons as well.
The one thing that I appreciate about what the author did, and Dar brought this up about certain communities, especially communities of color, where incarceration rates are higher. But one thing I do appreciate that the author did, he or she used animals to represent, you know, this thing. And I was like, I'm so happy that they were conscious enough about, you know, the things going on, that they used animals. And, you know, you really couldn't tell ethnically what race these animals were specifically supposed to be. And I did appreciate that about the book, because we already know the messaging that, you know, Black men go to jail way more. I can't quote you the exact statistic, but Black men are incarcerated at higher levels for the same crimes, same offenses as other communities. And that, you know, all communities of color, Latino, Hispanic, all communities of color are incarcerated at higher rates. But the fact of the matter is, other whites go to jail too. Whites go to jail too. So I do appreciate that the author was conscious enough to use animals. And to use, it wasn't racially clear of what kind of race this animal was. So I really do appreciate that, because when it comes to populations of lots of people, all races go to jail. All of them, every race can be found in jail. So when you have to talk to a child about dealing and coping with a parent in jail, they didn't make it a race issue. They made it a human issue. And I mean, even though it's animals in the book, it could be any human facing that same thing.
I agree with Gloria. I appreciate the fact that it was done with that form of an illustration, because it is ambiguous in terms of what their color of skin might be. So I appreciate that as well. I do like that. Because that means anyone can read it, because people of color aren't the only ones who go to jail. So if there's a white family or any other family experiencing this type of situation, this book might come in handy for them as well.
I was thinking, even though they didn't say what he went to jail for, it could have been something positive, like civil disobedience. Just thinking back when we had Black Panthers going to jail, it might have been.
You could write that. You could write that. You're an author. Get it.
I mean, that's a really good perspective, because in that instance, I would assume the child might have been like, yeah, my dad went to jail. He's fighting for our rights,
And I agree with
that. But still, kids are cruel. I don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's your guys' opinion. It still has a bad connotation. And to that respect, it depends on the time and place. That's one of those things that's time and location. Because like now, what would that look like? Because kids are cruel in general, and they're still gonna feel the same way and tease and make fun, which is gonna, spiral into something else with the child that is happening to, but child could be proud of it. Go ahead, Destiny.
When I was working with children, I noticed that the children who had parents in jail and those around them, the other children around them, they weren't really the negative ones. It was more the adults who knew that the parent was in jail. Because the kids would be like, so give you an example. The kid would be like, my dad is in jail. And, he went on to tell me why, and, how he goes to visit him, and, he miss him and he can't wait for him to get out and kind of stuff. And, the kids would be like, yeah, his dad went to jail. But I never heard anything negative come from the children. Now the adult would be like, if the child misbehaves, that's why your daddy in jail. You don't need to be behaving like that, or else you gonna wind up in jail.
Oh no, that's toxic. Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
I've heard most of the time it's the adults, who will say the negative things to the child about the parent being in jail rather than the children themselves. Most of the time when the adult says something like that, all the other children around will be like, or, you know what I'm saying? They didn't laugh. They didn't make fun. It was just more of a surprise, like, how you gonna say that? Because even, like, when I heard it, I was like, how you gonna say that? Things happen. They serving their time. I don't think you should say stuff like that when it comes to children. But like I said, I've had them, sit down, tell me, what they parent is in jail for, how long they're gonna be in jail, how often they visit, how often they talk. And most of the time, the children are happy that if the parent is still involved, the children are happy that the parent is still even involved with them. And I don't think the adult should really say stuff like that to the child. Because, you know, it affects, I feel like, you know, now you are just making this child think that'll be me one day. When that doesn't necessarily have to be. Yes, there are consequences, but it depends on what your actions were, the causes of your actions. You know, a lot of things go into play when those decisions are made. That's it.
Wow. The way you put that together, Destiny, I gotta say, because I work with a lot of children and I work with adults that work with children.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're right. Because I will hear people say, and I'm guilty of it too, the apple don't fall too far from the tree. You know, statements like that. The apple don't fall too far from the tree. Out of frustration and, you know, you don't know what's going on. A lot of times, which children have parents that are in jail. But when you find out a little tidbit of information like that, and when you live in small communities of high poverty, I'm working in a small community, high poverty. And usually you will know the families and the origins of these families. And you know, when you see the last name, you already know when it's about, when you see their last name. And it don't even take a lot of conversation. You know, you see the last name, you observe the behaviors, and I have even said myself, you know, the apple don't fall too far from the tree. And that is very ignorant on my part. And I know that you said it like that, Destiny, sometimes, especially the age range. Now, older kids, I work with older children, but younger kids, they don't know. They don't know no different. They get their information from adults. They get their information from older children. Once the children get older, they have already heard it. Yeah, my daddy went to jail, so I know I'm going to jail. Or my mama in jail, so I know. And people are always telling them you're going to end up in the grave or in jail. And I think as adults with people who work with children, we need to be more sensitive. Because Destiny, whoa. I never even really thought about it, you know, what that could be doing to a kid just because they are acting out in that moment. Like when the character, girl or boy, when the character threw the books off the desk, had those teachers been privy to that child going to jail, and they would have made a comment like, you know, your daddy in jail, you're going to be there too, for throwing some books on the desk, you know, off of a desk. That's deep. That's deep.
Well, Gloria, I'm proud of you for even taking accountability and recognizing it. A lot of adults will bypass it or just say, oh, that was nothing. But in reality, all words and treatments having a long-term effect on every human, not just a child, on all humans. Whatever you do and say makes impact. So the fact that you're aware obviously just means you'll just continue to do better. And as it is, you seem lovely. So I'm sure you'll continue to make positive strides with anyone you come in contact with. In speaking on what Destiny said, you know, I have family members and friends and acquaintances that come from lower income neighborhoods, and I even grew up in a lower income neighborhood. So I'm able to see the different effects on persons who have family members or close friends who have been incarcerated, whether it's repetitive or a one-time offense or whatever, and the impact, whether it's from dropping out of school, you know, repeating another grade, or having low self-esteem, or trying to fend for themselves. In fact, one personal thing, I had a really good friend in high school. We went to grade school together and everything. We grew up together. His father had become ill and came to pass. And they had a mortgage and it wasn't paid off. And the mother was an at-home mom. So when he became sick and began to decline in health, you know, because they owned a home, it wasn't easy to get aid because they were homeowners, despite them not being, you know, extremely wealthy. Because you own a home, many people will assume that you must be middle class or above, which is actually not true. And she started trying to work odd-end jobs so that she can afford to pay for him to get better care and things of that nature. And he came to pass, unfortunately. So she's still trying to work 2 to 3 jobs, although nothing was really adding up to much money because she had 4 mouths to feed, plus the bills, plus herself.
And so she was going to lose the house because she couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments. In an effort to help his mother not lose the house, he began working side jobs because at the time we weren't even 16 when his father came to pass, so he couldn't really work. So he had to do, under the table jobs, whoever would let him work as a kid. And then when he finally became legal, it still wasn't enough money. And the mom was letting him know that there's a chance that they're going to lose the house within months or within that year. Long story short, he makes other friends who are like, I can help you make money doing other things a lot faster. So he runs with these kids who were also in the same school. And we were in private school at the time too. She was trying to keep him private school, but he had a scholarship, so that's why he was able to stay. They go into wealthier neighborhoods and they go on robbing sprees and robbing the houses. And one of the kids had him hold a gun in his backpack. So they got caught. And long story short, he ended up in jail for like 7 years. And his prints weren't even on the gun. So I think that's what saved him, that he had no prints, because the gun had body counts on it and things of that nature. But this was a honorable kid who was in private school, never committed any crime, was an athlete and everything, who didn't have money to get proper representation, who just spent like 7 years of his life in jail. He went in as a kid and came out as an adult, and his whole mindset is completely different. A person who had AP classes for college went to jail.
That's a whole other dynamic of a
Yeah.
child going to jail and growing up in jail.
And so with the brother who was looking up to him, he ended up dropping out of school altogether, just saying it wasn't worth it. Dad is dead, and the next best male figure he had ended up in jail for such a lengthy time too. So they ended up becoming wayward in that kind of a way. And the last two, the mom was able to salvage, but that's just hard to see how the decline versus where they were headed and what transpired in the effects of one member of the family going to jail and what it caused, and the ricochet effect on the mom, the depression that she endured after, and the guilt. It's horrible to see that. And people made fun of him too, saying that there were other options. He could have went about it other ways, but he didn't know. No one talks about
even with the kid that went to jail, the younger brother, do you think with proper support that could have been prevented?
Absolutely. But this is what I'm saying. When you're young and you think your peers have your best interest because it's more difficult to communicate with adults in terms of what avenue you should be able to gauge, there are a lot of things that I'd like to believe that if we had better communication skills with our parents and that we weren't just treated as immature children who can't make certain levels of comprehension, many things could have been avoided. Because honestly, I'm not saying that the mom shouldn't have expressed that, listen, here's what might happen, because she's making them aware so that if the change comes, they're not, shocked by it. But what I would have just said is like, listen, the best course of action is to downsize it. And if I can see that I can't maintain it, it's better for her to just simply sell the house to salvage whatever income she would have been able to get from that and get something smaller or apartment. But again, many people, and again, she wasn't, I don't want to say this is about education, but she didn't finish school herself, the mother. She married early and everything like that. Obviously, she didn't say her husband becoming sick, and she was an at-home mom for all her life. She never worked. So her entering the market.
That's a different dynamic though. That's so the parent that has passed, someone who was, supporting the household, and then because that loss, there's a breakdown of the household. Again, that's a whole other topic. I just want to stay focused on the topic because it still connects in that, we need to, in these type of situations or in that type of situation, be supporting the children that's going to be affected the most. Because even though, like you said, you may not think they understand or can comprehend, they do. And they need to be explained things as they go along the way in the language that they can understand, and then also be supported, but not just by the parent. And obviously, if a parent is going to jail, they can't really support them at all. So therein lies the community, the school, social workers, even at the jails, the jail houses. In one of the images in the book, one of the officers was, kind of playful with the child. That can go either way. If their experience coming into that situation is wrought with trauma and violence and, yelling, it's a whole, it doesn't take much. Children are fragile. So if that's their experience from the beginning, just, everything being hit so hard and they don't understand, nobody's explaining anything. It's already, negative. Then on top of that, violent and loud, that's just, it's gonna take them to a place you don't want them to go in a very short time, especially as they grow up, even if they don't exhibit right away outwardly, because sometimes kids just clam up. They might not say anything. They might continue to be A students just because they don't want to deal. They might be getting teased and all these things and they don't want to act out. They keep to themselves, stay focused, but then grow up. And it can go either way. It can still go in a positive direction, but definitely had an effect on them. An effect that might not be as traumatic if they got adequate support as the process was happening.
I agree. The thing is, it's about making sure that we're aware of how to get that support or gaining information. In this story, like where they presented a social worker and things of that nature, none of those types of situations are often offered, or many people in these types of communities are not aware that they have access to these things, or they feel embarrassed asking for it. As often when people hear social worker, they automatically presume something negative. There's a negative connotation associated with it.
That's very true. And that's like I said, one of the main reasons I like this book, because it's giving so much resources and tools to get this conversation out, to support a child going through the situation. It is still on the parent to actually do the work. Going to see somebody in jail is a lot of work. They didn't really lay that out. I've been in that situation, especially like when they said they moved him and it's further away. That's a lot. It's a mother, she got more than one kid, getting up early, packing up the kids, fares for the bus, the trip itself. You got kids all different ages, that's diapers, potty trips and food. You get there, you're tired. You probably in a different frame of mind when you get there, not very happy, first of all. Kids is probably from the long ride, agitated and whatnot. You have to change all of that before you even meet up with whomever you're gonna meet up with, so that y'all can have a joyous time and make it a worthwhile experience. Then you gotta pack up and head back home and do all these things again. And then in the meantime, if she's by herself, she wasn't, she had her mother, or maybe his mother, but there was a grandmother. She had a little bit of support at home, but she was by herself for the most part. And she traveled by herself with all those kids and all those things. So it's like, it's still opening a path, a doorway, a conversation. And that's the main thing for me on this, because anyone going through it knows it's a hell of a lot more. But a lot of people, like was mentioned earlier, don't get the support they need. And I'm glad you guys highlighted on how the adults really need to show empathy and demonstrate what they want the children to kind of emulate, to, I'm assuming, get to a point we all want to get to. We don't want children who have to be in school, being harassed, terrorized by their peers or something like this. This should, even if you don't have a child whose parent went to jail, but you know of one, or just to get this book, just so that your child can understand that these things happen. It might happen to your friend. It might happen to you. You never know. Things happen. But this is how you can handle it. This is what you shouldn't do to someone going through this. That's where it starts. Like I always say, these things start at home. If you at home talking about, ha, so-and-so went to jail, or yeah, they're gonna end up in jail too because of XYZ. What are you breeding? What kind of messages are you sending? That conversation definitely has to get changed. Also, thinking about our men specifically, and I'm talking about African-American, people of color in jail, how they're feeling. That's another, again, separate topic, but as they did show, he was disappointed as well. Of course, he didn't want to be there, but just the fact that so many fathers in jail and mothers too that are disconnected from their family that will help them in their mental health getting through whatever they're getting through. So that when they do come home, like the author had put in there, you know, they feel part of the home. It's not like I'm a stranger coming into this new space. It's like, no, you've been communicating with me steadily. You know, we've had a good relationship. You know, you got the kids writing letters, which nobody really does anymore, sending pictures and whatnot. But it makes a difference because you're also keeping your parent who's in jail and away from you whole, because you don't know what they're going through in jail. Besides the fact that they're disappointed, they're lonely. Hopefully nothing violent is happening to them, but you don't know. They're not eating the best of food. They're not getting the best mental health care or probably physical health care. So again, this book alone just opens up that conversation, but most importantly, it focuses on a child's point of view and how we should be governing how we handle the situation and who we let in. If you got a social worker that's acting an ass, not giving you the support you need, get a new one. It's not that hard. You don't have to deal with it if they're not supporting your home. If you're at school and your child is saying that the teacher is bad mouthing the parent that's in jail, making the child feel like, they're going to be a problem child now, or that's where they're headed. That's a problem. And as parents, we have to step up if that's the case, because that's not conducive to that child's learning experience.
I agree. Me personally, I don't really know anybody in my close circle or in my family that's incarcerated or has family members that close by that are incarcerated. These are things that I'll hear from acquaintances and things of that nature. So I have more of a difficult time in relating, but I do understand as a social worker and as a person who works the field, the grave impact that it causes. And I could only put in scenario in my mind, like if this thing were to happen to myself or my children's father, the impact that it would cause. This is why you got to woo side so that you don't have to catch a case, as they like to say. So, it's a very thin threshold sometimes, depending on the situation, especially if it pertains to the well-being and the safety of your children. So what would bring a person to jail? These are different things to talk about, like how these things occur and so frequently, and especially in communities of color. Really, really sad. Very, very sad. Do you guys, or do you specifically know personally or close by anyone in prison?
This stuff, the family members I know were in a while ago, and they're out now. But no one recent.
Do any of us on this chat have anybody that we would say that are close or within our circle, whether it's recent or in the past, that's been incarcerated, like if it's more than a week in jail and up?
Yeah.
Yes. I know personally, yes, of family members who did some time in jail. But for me personally, their being incarcerated did not have a direct impact on me. As a matter of fact, I have a family member right now that is still in jail right now. And it's a male, but his
I'll say definitely, like I said earlier, as a child, it was definitely handled differently.
Yeah.
I was maybe younger than 10. Wasn't a close family member, but for the most part, it was still like, this is not a place for kids. So basically you have nothing to do with this here. So move to the side. Like I know, and I've shared, memories and time with this person. It meant something to me, but not enough for, my caregiver to be like, okay, you can come with us to the jail to visit them. And the times where I've had family members that I did visit, because we were so disconnected, didn't really write much, if at all. Didn't much talk on the phone, collect cost money. And if they were calling, they talked to whoever they needed to talk to, and it was a short talk. So, there was opportunities definitely knowing what I know now, and even with this wonderful book, that, you know, things could have been a little different. And I definitely think it might have helped their support as well. Because I do feel like when I was older and I started doing it more myself, I saw a difference, because it's hard to get to know a person that you knew, and now to get to know them years later, you know, after they've been through some things and, you know, had a whole other life going on in a whole other place. It's very different. It's very different. And if it's a person that, you know, they're getting out at all, it's very hard to have a relationship with a person like that, because sometimes it's a situation where, say if it's a parent coming home after decades and they're coming home, that means where you live, that's their house. But to you, they're a stranger. What is that like now? Now you may not want to get to know them depending on where you are in your life. If you're an adult, if you're a teenager, because you know they're about to be on their own path into adulthood. And then that person, you don't know where they are mentally, honestly. They want to have a connection. You know, they're home. They want to get to some type of normal, but they have a whole lot of their own, you know, baggage to shed, you know, things they need to go through. And still, if anyone knows anyone who came home from prison after being in there for a long time, they have a whole other set of things they need to go through just to reestablish themselves in society.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. And when there was time, years that passed in between that, you know, connections could have been made to make that transition a little smoother and a little bit healthier for everyone involved, you know, you got to take those opportunities. It's like we know better now, we do better now. You know, if we not supporting our brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers behind bars in some type of way, you know, who do we have to blame when they come out and they feel like they can't contribute? Things change so much, especially if you've been in jail for even just 10 years. Things have changed so much. It's hard. But if you, like they said, just talk about everyday life on the phone, in a letter. I'm not sure. I know some places you can maybe do like messenger calls and stuff like that, a video call, depending on, you know, what they're in for, how it's set up, the facility. But just talk, be regular, you know, they're catching up with you. I've seen like movies where people go in and they come out and it's like, you know, they didn't have cars like that when they went in. You know, computer, they don't know nothing about that. Cell phone, oh my God, there's no regular landline phone with a big cord. Somebody could have been talking them through that along the way, sending them pictures, telling them what's what. Go ahead, Destiny.
Most of the time, those who went
I can hear
in.
you.
Can you hear me now?
Can hear you.
Hold
It
on.
doesn't say that you're muted, but I can't hear you. Can anyone else hear her?
I can hear her clearly. I can hear her clearly.
Can you hear me now?
Nope, I can't hear you. You want to type in the chat, or you want to?
I hear everybody just fine.
Yeah.
I can hear that. It's just you. Somebody type that in the chat.
Were you gonna say something, Gloria? I see you highlighted.
Yeah, Gloria's talking.
Okay, so I guess it's on me then. I can't hear. Give me a second. Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Most of the time with the people who have been in jail for long periods of time and like it's been like a huge shift, you know, like you said, when they went in, computers just started or there wasn't internet. Most of the times, if those people can't adjust, they are the ones who will become repeat offenders. You know, and oftentimes the jail will tell you, you know, we'll see you back here or they'll be back. You know what I'm saying? Because they haven't had someone steady on the outside to keep them aware of the changes that have been made since they've been in. You know, and I think the prisons do have programs for those to adjust. But I think those programs depend on what you in for and how much time you have. I want to say, but they do have programs to help those adjust, and it is hard to try to keep those people. Well, try to keep contact with those people, because sometimes you just forget. You forget. You busy. You got your own stuff going on, and it sounds bad to say, but it just honestly that person isn't there in front of you. So what they got going on, it doesn't register a lot of times, and you know what I'm saying? You put them on the back burner because they aren't in front of you, or just depending on what it is, how they got there,
Yeah, sometimes we disconnect on purpose. It's true.
Sometimes you just don't want nothing to do with that individual, depending on what they went in for. Like if you are aware of the circumstances, like say, okay, for example, say if someone went to jail for murder, but you're like privy to what exactly they murdered the individual for, sometimes that can determine whether or not the relationship still continues. Because if it's a valid reason, like me personally, if it's a valid reason, I'm still gonna keep contact. If I can,
I agree.
Do what's necessary, I'll do what's necessary. If it's like a valid reason, at least in my opinion.
It all depends until we all get into that situation, right? But I agree with you. I feel you on that, Destiny, because there are certain things, like a terrible story. I met a guy one day. We were just at an amusement park, and I fell, and he helped me up. And he said, "You know what's crazy? You're the only person who was nice to me and told me thank you, King." And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. You should hear that more often." He said, "Well, I just got out." I was like, "Oh, got out of what?" He was like, "Out of jail." I was like, "Ooh, spicy. What happened?" And he told me, honestly, he went to jail. He was in jail for 15 years for murder. And I was like, very spicy. And I'm like, geez.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, well, what happened? He was like, he was trying to defend his sister. And I was like, oh, who was hurting her? Some guy that was raping her. And he still went to jail for that because they're like, oh, he could have called the police. He had enough time to just restrain the person and he didn't have to violently react. And it's so much easier said than when you actually have to endure a situation that's like that. Nothing related to prison at all. I was just there to witness someone punch my mama in the face. They chose the wrong, that didn't go well. It went very bad. And all my brothers were there. You chose the wrong day to attack my mama. So, imagine if my father and other adults didn't come and intervene. One of my siblings would have definitely went to jail for how they had to handle that person for my mom. And they were upset with us. But in all honesty, even with all that I have going on again, I don't have regret if I had to go to jail and defend my mother. That's how I really feel. But I do agree. Can I try to take a pause? But it's a lot easier said than done when you're in the heat of the moment. That's why they're called passion crimes.
I just wanted to interject, the impact that prison has on children. Children don't go to prison, but the people around them who do, it does have a serious impact on them. And I did want to say that as a child, my father, my mom, they got me and my little sister all dressed up and we went to prison. We visited a extended family member, a cousin in prison, and we witnessed him get married. He got married to a woman while he was in prison. This woman was not in prison, but and I didn't even know what the word conjugal meant at that time. He was allowed to have conjugal visits. And so we went there. And for the first time, I found out that this person who was a family member was extremely talented, could sing, could play the guitar, could do all of these things. And I had not known initially why he was in prison. But as a child, we had to be searched. We had to take off our shoes. We had to go through the little metal detectors like the character was saying. And we had to be wanded and stuff like that. It was a one-time experience. Witnessed the wedding from an early age. It might have been like 10 or 11, maybe 10 or 11. And when I came home, that was one experience. That was one experience visiting someone in prison. One. And I remember it has such a deep impact on me. One visit. And I'm like, if he's safe enough to get married, what are he in prison for? You know, just like, you know, if they're allowed to do if he can get a wife in prison, why he in there? And, you know, just trying to make sense of this world around me as to why this family member who drew his wife at the wedding, this beautiful picture, he can draw, he could sing, he played the guitar at his wedding in prison. So from a child's eyes, you know, just thinking about those kids with parents, while I was a child, I'm not aware if any of my parents went to jail as a child. I'm not aware of that. If it happened, I was completely oblivious to it. But just visiting an extended family member one time had a deep impact on what I was thinking about, how I was feeling. You know, you had to check. I'm little. I had to take off my shoes. I couldn't bring in my little purse at 11, whatever. And it had such a deep impact on me. I cannot imagine what it is doing to other children who do this week after week or month after month and year after year. If it has such a deep impact on me one time, and a person that I wasn't even close to, my father was close to the person, not
That's
me.
deep. That's deep.
So,
That's deep.
yeah. And, you know, come to find out later on in life, I was informed of what he was in prison for. And it just made me more confused. Like, well, why did y'all let him get married? Like, why y'all letting him have all of these freedoms? And you think I'm a child. And I'm like, why are y'all letting him do all of this stuff if he did that to get there? So I was a little confused as a child. So I can only understand, you know, I can only sympathize and empathize with children with a parent in jail. The second point I wanted to bring up is that I work in a high poverty area, and a lot of the children that I service have blended families. And within those blends of their families, they have different fathers. Lots of the children that I'm in community with, in contact with, they have different fathers. And like two siblings could have the same mother, but one of their fathers is in jail. And I have heard this and seen this with my own eyes, where one sibling is actually teasing the other sibling in the same household about having a parent in jail.
What? I don't get it. They have different parents, like a different father or a different mother?
So children with the same mother, and this mother has different fathers for her children. And one of those fathers is in jail. I've heard siblings with the same mother pick on their sibling with a different father for their father being in jail. So, you know, with
That's
that,
crazy.
yeah, it is crazy. And some of us can't even think, especially if I was raised where all my siblings, we all have the same mother and the same father. But there are children out here, and a lot of children who are in families where there are different dads, different mothers, there are blended situations, there are step parents, step siblings, half siblings, all of these different things. And in the community that I'm in, I've heard and witnessed children like bullying each other in the same home. So I think reading this book, we need to have books like this available, and not just for kids who went to jail, kids, family members who went to jail, but even for parents to be enlightened about the impact that sibling went to jail, that sibling's parent went to jail, excuse me. Because what is the mom doing? What is the mom?
Mom.
Like
in the past, we've been trying not to do that and point the finger at mom, but in this case, mom. She said in the bed. Oh.
I mean, it's just something to think about, as we're talking about the accountability of teachers and how they talk to children, the accountability of social workers and how they talk to children. We need to start thinking about how these families handle when loved ones go to jail, because how does the rest of the community even know? Things like that. The only way I became privy to some of these things was through altercations and fights that occurred at school. Oh, you're teasing them because daddy went to jail, but y'all brothers. Why are y'all fighting at the school? Yeah.
That's low emotional.
I didn't like that father.
That's low emotional intelligence, but it's poor coping skills too, that they feel like they have to use that kind of a defense to offend someone so grossly. But that's a mindset thing. That's the environment, because a lot of communities of color are like that, where they look for something worse to go ahead and excuse whatever else is either frustrating them, or if they feel like they're losing, they'll use that kind of banter or do something worse in general and physically. It's just a weak way of getting out of a situation or dealing with something. It doesn't help at all. And I agree with you, Gloria. Like, it's that's real messy. That's insane. I never even thought about that type of component. That's horrible.
Specifically in a blended family, what I kept saying, mom, is that clearly mom is not setting the tone that that's not okay, for one. Even if she did not, have a good relationship with the parent that went to jail, she should still take into account how it's affecting the kids. And this is why, again, like what you said, Gloria, about having this available and why it's so important. Because clearly, if, these things were considered, if something like this was available, that might not be the case, because even once you get past the fact of the matter, the next thing is, what is the relationship like between that adult and the other kids, and that adult that's in jail, and either the now, managing father or stepfather and the mother. It's like, because that's, like Dar was saying, that's a whole other dynamic, and you have so many other adults, what's a good word for this, intermingling, and having to come to some sort of healthy agreement on, how this male handles and deals with my kids versus how I want to deal with their kids, and vice versa. And it's like, you have to get beyond that and then deal with this other situation of one of the fathers going to prison. And I'm sorry, the only person I can point to is the mom in that situation, because she's, the common denominator. Yeah, in the chat, my daddy can beat up your daddy. That kind of stuff. It's like, you as an adult have to sniff out those things. You're not going to catch it all the time, because you can have, talk to you, turn blue in the face. Kids going to still go to school and do what they want to do. But if you're not even having that conversation at home, or you're the type of adult who would kind of play that on the kids just because you don't like the other person, and that's why you're not with them in the first place, maybe, you got to think about the effect it's going to have on that kid, whether or not you agree with it. If you felt like the father or significant other was or is a piece of crap, you got to let the child, I feel like, find out that on their own. You don't have to lie or hide anything from them, but you should not go out of your way to badmouth them, put them down, because that language you're using, they're using as well when you're not around. And it's shaping, the type of person they're going to be, and how also they're going to deal with that adult later on in life. And they may not have the whole story. Just because you guys had a bad relationship doesn't mean they have to have a bad relationship. That needs to develop on its own.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to, in the book, they talked about all of these support systems, right? The teachers, the social workers, the, counselors, the police, all of these support systems. And sometimes I get a little irate because a lot falls back onto the education system. Well, teachers should know better. Teachers should do this. Teachers should do that. Teachers should do this. But I am really to the point where do families take accountability? Period. Yeah, we need to support children. There's a lot of children, 30 kids. Out of those 30 kids, I don't know how many kids, have a parent in jail, but the families know. And if you don't make a teacher privy, or you don't make the school system privy to what is going on in your personal life, because, a lot of people are still under that, what goes on in our house stays in our house. What goes on in, behind these doors, your daddy went to jail. You better not go up to that school and tell them people your daddy in jail. You better not. But yet this kid is dealing with the gravity of that. And in this community, like in my community, the murder rate is very high. There was a lot of retaliation murders going on all summer long. And so not only were daddies in jail, but siblings were committing crimes, in retaliation and things like that. So you come and this thing is spilling out in the schools and the teachers are not privy. But yet, when a teacher would say something like, oh, the apple don't fall too far from the tree, things like that, it's automatically, oh, that teacher is, oh, that's, unprofessional or whatever. But we also got to think that the clientele is unprofessional. So everybody needs support. No fingers pointing. Everybody needs support. If I didn't know your daddy was in jail, but I caught your daddy, and your daddy was a handful, and now you a handful. So it's not necessarily that you knew the daddy was in jail. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's about information, and everybody must take accountability. Everybody. I can only talk for myself, but you can't blame me for what I don't know.
Go ahead, Dara.
Just to speak on what you said, Gloria, I was trying to take some notes down really quick because I didn't want to interject you because you were making some great statements. I agree and I disagree at the same time. And I'm only disagreeing because, obviously we're not here to lay out the foundations of how we can go about making this possible. But at this current time, I disagree because with the way the current system is set up across America, it honestly, especially for a person of color, it is not favorable for you to go ahead to a white system and now say, here's what's going on in my household. Because the number one thing that they do is, one, they automatically assume that everyone in the household is moving in the same wavelength and mindset. They also will assume that your family across the board has the same behavior. They'll assume that you're not with education or have family members who are properly educated, or assume because you're not educated that you are intelligent or intellectual person. They also put these different things on your records, and they will continue to pass it out, even if it's not meant to be a rumor. An average person who's reading it, as you mentioned earlier, where you say, well, that's the apple doesn't fall from the tree. That happens a lot. And I'm speaking personally from witnessing it, whether I myself was taking in persons who were going into prison or helping them be released, or working with individuals who have family members who are incarcerated or released from prison. It's an all-around messed up situation for persons of color. And even when we take out the prison factor, point blank, period, the system is not designed for us or with us in mind or in consideration. And enough of us are not in the field to help people who look like us go through this process a whole lot better, which is why we refrain from asking and requesting help, because a lot of the times it leads to an ACS case where they even remove the children. So that's not helpful either. There's got to be another way. And obviously the best way is to reform the system in general, because there should be a level of transparency. But I'll also be honest, I don't want someone externally who especially doesn't understand or respect my culture coming into my home telling me how I need to be raising my kids. Because there's a lot of things that we can agree that are not so kosher in America that are going on in other homes that we wouldn't like or may not want to take into our own homes. That's just my personal stance.
Now, I'm just speaking from my perspective and how I would handle something like that, just because I get it, what you're saying, Dar. But like I was speaking about earlier about if you had a social worker like they had in the book and you felt like they weren't supporting the family, you get another social worker. Everything seems so cut and dry, so easy, laid out in the book. Somebody just says it. It's work. It's hard work. When my child had an issue developmentally, I got her help, and I kept seeking better help as I went along. Yes, you have other things to consider, and how, it may go on your permanent record, who's involved, who's privy to the information, and how they treat you. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to do what's best for my child. I'm going to educate myself, and I'm going to seek out, professionals that I can trust. It's just like everything else in life. You got to take a stab at it. You interview people. who are quote unquote going to help you. If they're not helping you, they're fired. But you got to get the help. It can be people, in your community as well. It doesn't always have to be from the white institutions, but you still got to do the work. You can't just, what happens in the house stays in the house, because sometimes the house is toxic. And even in teaching your kids that, I get what you're saying. I just want to reiterate for parents to do that work as well. Just like Laura was saying, it's not all on the teachers. It is on the parents. I think we're all kind of clear on that too. But the community as a whole can support. You might have to reassess your community.
I know exactly what Dar. Oh, she has her hand up. My bad, Dar.
She has her hand up. Yeah. Go ahead, Dar.
You're on mute. Dar, you're on mute.
Sorry, I had to switch between the screens. So I'm doing it on my cell phone. I apologize, ladies. I was trying to unmute. So just to piggyback a little bit, because like I said, I still agree, because I think we all collectively want the same thing. And I'm not saying that it should stay inside the household, right? But like you just said, sometimes the household is toxic too, and so is the community. So here's like one of the things that I love to promote, and I even tell people to do this as affirmation. If you know that where you sleep is toxic all around, from inside your house to the moment you step outside, you need to find a way to remove yourself. But here's something else that also exists. Post-traumatic stress disorder, right, is so natural within the communities of color, and we don't even know it's happening. And I can show you some documentaries later on related to this, right? Here's a post-traumatic stress disorder example. Where I grew up young, as a child, every single day, no lie, every single day without failing, there was a shooting where I grew up. Every single day, there was a shooting, and every single day the police was called in my community. And there were parks nearby. We were never allowed to go to it because the crime rates and everything else were just so bad. And who was committing this crime? People who look just like me and you. Where did I live? In a community with people who look just like me and you. Where did I grow up? With people who look just like me and you. Who's in my household? People who look like just like me and you. But the mindset of who was in my house versus who I had a community with, and the parks and things like that, and even some of the local schools, the mindset and the cultural backgrounds were not similar at all. Completely different dynamic. So far more difficult to try to commune with someone and try to get assistance with certain things, when culturally there's a language barrier, there's a cultural barrier, there's an emotional barrier, there's a spiritual, there's so many barriers. So this is why I'm saying that it's very important and crucial for us to have these types of discussions. Not only have these forms of discussions, but find ways to educate ourselves, which I agree with you on, as well as find employable positions to go ahead and represent people who look like us, and reach out to people on the levels, because they want to relate to someone who looks like a sister, who has natural hair, who might have a Caribbean or African or Hispanic background. We want someone who knows us and knows not to make me feel threatened, because especially if we're all around like the 80s and late 70s or early 90s babies, I'm going to presume that we mostly saw white social workers growing up. So automatically your defenses are up when it comes to a white person, no matter what kind of cookies and water they come offering. And where I grew up and how I grew up, I'm not allowed to eat from anybody anyway. So the moment you offer me water, you a suspect to me anyway. Because in my culture, and it sounds crazy because it's just water, but in my culture, don't offer me no food. You might be trying to kill me. And it sounds crazy, but this is a cultural barrier. So if you try to offer me something and I already know something bad is happening, you suspect to me. You suspect to me.
That's true. I mean, I'm not from Caribbean background or nothing. If everything is already going down bad and you offer me food or water, no, you better not. You better not. I was raised the same way. You don't take nothing from nobody. But I say this in other discussions, because I've been on the book discussions in the past. I always say we need more Black teachers. We need more Black nurses and doctors. We need more, or people of color, not just Black, people of color in these professional spaces, because I am a teacher who grew up in poverty. I grew up in a high poverty area. So, and I don't have a lot of African-American counterparts or people of color as counterparts. I move in predominantly white spaces. With that being said, when families do recognize that, oh my God, this teacher sounds Black on the phone, or this teacher, when they come to the meet the teacher and they see that it's a Black teacher, usually I become, and it's taxing because I don't know you like that. We still, just because we share the same skin, that don't mean we can, if y'all get what I'm saying. We might have the same skin, but I don't identify. I don't identify
Facts.
y'all
Fact.
doing. So, but they feel like I am a representative. Their children typically come to the Black teacher when they're having an issue. The parents come to the Black teacher when there's something going on because we share the same color. Don't mean we share the same community. Don't mean we share the same values, but they feel safer in that space because there is a teacher that they feel represents them in that space. So when I'm speaking from a very limited perspective, when I say, you can't blame me when I wasn't privy to it. And like, I grew up in that era. What goes on in our house stays in our freaking house. You bet not go up there and tell them people what's going on in here. You bet not. So when they see me, they're like, oh, I can tell her. Kids just automatically, I don't know, kids automatically know, well, I could tell her. And children who share my skin color will tell me things. And I know growing up almost like them, okay, this is what we need to call. This situation needs a social worker. This situation, you needed your behind beat for that. You needed your behind, you knew better. So kids will share with me certain things that are happening in their homes. Had they shared that with another person, outside of that color or culture, that person would have reported them to police authorities. I'm like, no, that's not a situation you report. This is culturally appropriate for this child. This is culturally appropriate. That parent spanked that child. That is appropriate within that culture. Oh my God, you got hit with a belt. Oh my God. Now you take this child out their home, a loving, nurturing, fulfilling home, because they got spanked with a belt. No, boo-boo, that's culture. Not saying I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. I'm just saying that's not a situation to take a child out of the home. You get what I'm saying? So I do believe that we need more people of color in professional spaces so that when parents do go to jail or things like this happen, that the social workers look like the children that they're servicing. I think that's important. Kids feel safer when they think you have something in common with them.
I agree. Here's a crazy example, totally unrelated to prison though, but as a social worker, I had a director of mine go into a field and we went to a Pakistani home. And when I went there, this white man straight up said, oh, you're not supposed to give babies water. We all got quiet. Look at y'all faces. We all got quiet and we looked at this white man and we looked at each other. It's like we understood and we looked at that man and said, well, why not? And he said that, oh, because it's not healthy. And we said, we don't know where you got that. I said, in my culture, we give water. And they said, us too. They don't give the kids water until after they hit age 1. Not over here, we don't. So I agree with you that it's incredibly important to have someone from the same culture or at least a similar culture where that person understands that you're really able to connect with them and can understand their background a bit better. And I also understand your statement when you were saying about spanking them with a belt or corporal punishment. It depends on how you're going about that. That's a whole nother ball game too with that, because there's some people who don't know how to apply corporal punishment in a decent way. Sometimes it's really out of control. But I agree with you that is a part of the culture of people of color on a global level. So white people need to get with the program and understand that this is our way of taming our children, unfortunately, because a lot of it goes back to slavery and it shouldn't lead to someone being detained because of that. And in fact, this just made the news the other day where a grandfather beat his kid and the white people made cops go over there for a wellness check. Look at that. It's crazy.
Yeah, that happens a lot, actually, especially now. And it's just, because everything is on social media and privy to other people's judgment, quote unquote, we know who the people are. But anyway, we touched on a lot today. I just want to say, I want to thank you, lovely ladies, for all these other parts that we put to the book that could really help families going through the situation, and hopefully will allow other communities to see that, you know, there's other ways and other things to consider when it comes to this conversation, and hopefully stock this book in their schools, make it available to social workers, ACS offices, just because it's like, to me, something so simple. A kid could just pick this up just because he's bored or she is bored and be thumbing through and be like, oh. And maybe they're going through this and they don't have any support. And then they see this and then ask for the support themselves. Because our kids nowadays are very vocal, way more self-confident than some of us were at the same age. And I'm just hoping that, you know, that starts, you know, kind of a firestorm of us getting what we're asking for. Because I'm in a lot of other groups too, where we are almost begging for people of color to get into positions where we need this kind of support. Social work, healthcare, you know, everywhere. Because it's really helpful, and we need it to just for our kids to see that it's possible, and that there is a face in that group that looks like you that you can feel more comfortable with. Because even like I say in some of my other groups, especially when it comes to healthcare, yes, a person who looks like me, I trust more. I'm going to open up more, the same way that children do. Like I said before, adults are just big ass kids. Our feelings don't change. I feel more trustworthy, more comfortable, more safe when somebody that looks like me is in the room. Even if I got to deal with someone, you know, of another culture, of another color, or what have you, if I feel like I have support in the room that looks like me, it makes a big difference of whether or not I'm gonna drink that water. And that, because that one little thing alone, me having that little sip of water, means that I am allowing someone in to help me. Me not taking that water is me closing up, me putting up walls. And that just, you know, reverberates over time into, you know, where our children are going, into schools, into careers, versus, you know, to streets or to prison. And again, just recapping and reiterating, adults, be mindful of the language you're using around children, show some empathy. I'm pretty sure that all of us grew up in school and teased about something. Doesn't matter. Kids are just cruel. It ain't gotta be that bad. And it's a lot worse now than it used to be. It might be because of social media, because we can, you know, see it where it was, you know, kind of quiet before, but it can be remedied. It can be remedied to an extent. It shouldn't be such a stigma, especially since it affects our population so heavily when it comes to a parent being in jail for whatever reason. We should have ways and be better at supporting each other just through difficulty, just knowing that someone else is suffering and they just need a little support. You know, what's gonna happen is what's gonna happen culturally, but just to know that, you know, this person is feeling some type of way, they're down, you know, you could say nothing and just let them go through their process. That's another option. You don't always have to poke the bear, so to speak. Does anyone have any thing to say before I close out? Well, thank you again, ladies. And I will see you next month for the next book club. If you have any suggestions, you want to do movies, I know we do have a couple of memes we're doing for the relationship talks and the adult talks. But as far as like the children's books, movies, or any other media specifically for children, let me know what you guys are thinking about for April. Like, we do have a list, but I'm gonna do the spinner again. So we'll post it.